This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. There's an old adage in athletics that says, no pain, no gain. People have applied that for years and years. I guess it's kind of almost a carrot that they hang out in front of themselves so that they can drive on through whatever discomfort that they might have before them to achieve a goal athletically. Those things that sit out on the horizon that they see that can, bring them great success, maybe fortune in some circumstances. But there are just certain things that the physical body will not allow you to push through. There are certain basic needs that we have just from a biological standpoint that if they are not met, we will die and it will end in tragedy. And today, we're going to discuss one of these tragedies, a case that has finally, after all this time, it's been adjudicated. And the family of this young man that we're going to talk about today has finally received something. Of course, it'll never replace a life lost. Today, that life lost is the life of Grant Brace. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. I despise any time I hear a young life has been lost as a result of something that seems so frivolous and so pointless in the big picture. You think about what could have been, and that's one of the great tragedies with deaths involving young people, particularly those that are accomplish things that many of us never could from a physical standpoint. And you see they're brought to their knees by some issue that they're having, and maybe it goes unattended, and that's what happened. As always, Dave, Mack, I got to tell you, I'm just amazed by some of these cases that we cover on Body Bags, but this one, man, it just kind of bored down into my heart.
With the death of Grant Brace being an athlete, I looked at this because I actually did wrestle in high school. My son Tyler wrestled in high school and went to the state championships. And I know what it takes to be that. I was not that, by the way, just FYI. To be clear, I stunk so bad, I lost a wrestling match in 28 seconds. I'm not kidding. 28 seconds. You know how bad you have to be to lose that fast?
I really don't, because I've never wrestled. I was a football player, but I had a coach that was a state wrestling champion, and he was one of our football coaches. And he said, if you think you've got it tough out here on this practice field in football, you don't know tough until you've wrestled. And that was his contention. So I've always admired him. I've always imagined that it's a tough gig.
As somebody who has played sports, loved sports, and coached sports, and have children who have been involved in sports, I will tell you that there's two things you can't stand. In the world of Little League, it's the parents. In the world of high school and college athletics, it's the coaches. When a coach does not respect the body of their athletes, when they don't, and I'm going to tell you, if you're a coach at any level, you'd have to know what you're doing to your athletes physically. And it's not an excuse. In this day and age, it is not an excuse to say, I didn't know. First of all, let me tell you about who Grant Brace was, Joe. Grant Brace, he was one of the best liked kids coming out of Alcoa High School. He graduated in 2018. As a high school wrestler, I looked up his record. You know what it was? He was 128-33. He lost 33 times in his wrestling career in high school and won 128 times. He played football, and was a 3-time state champion in football. But he was also a member of the National Honors Society. After he graduated, he decided to take his talents to the next level, and he became a varsity wrestler on the University of Cumberland's men's team. And yet, when he wrote letters to family, friends, when he talked to them, what his biggest fear was, this guy was a people pleaser. I just gave you his background. Oh, by the way, did I mention the 3 state football championships? I did. This is a team player, a team guy. And believe it or not, wrestling is a team sport. But he was afraid that he wasn't cutting the mustard, that his coaches just were making him not believe in himself. And when you take the confidence away from a player, wow, you've really damaged them. And this guy was damaged. He was so afraid that they were going to cut him loose that he would have done anything they asked. And I think part of that is the reason we're talking about him today. How does somebody who is so physically fit die in the process of working out?
I don't understand it either. You know, I'm a university professor and I'm a big supporter of our athletic programs at my university. I attend many things to a fault. Probably when I shouldn't be there, I should be doing something else, but I can't. It makes me feel young when I go. All right. And particularly basketball games. I love going to football games. I love going to basketball games because I'm right there. I'm in the middle of it. I'm right courtside, yelling and screaming and carrying on. I get caught up in it. When you're not there at the actual event and you have a chance to go to a practice, particularly at a university, these are fine-tuned events. Okay. I mean, the people that they have that take care of the student athletes are supposed to be at the top of their game. First off, if you've got a staff that is manning a team, you're going to have athletic trainers there. And when you have a trainer is not just there to put tape on you. They're there to, first off, if there's any kind of injury, they're going to provide acute care. Like if somebody twists their ankle, hurts their knee. These are the people in football particularly that you'll see running out onto the field. You know, they've got like the bag of stuff around their waist, you know, where they can treat people. You know, they pull out all of their gear and whatnot, and they might wave the surgeon over that's on the sideline that serves the team as well. But most of the time, that acute care that they're providing at that moment in time is needed. But there's something else that trainers do. They monitor their athletes, and the trainer works directly for the head coach and the coaching staff. And so they fill in the coaches on what the status of a player is. And it's not just a matter of looking for individuals that are bumped, bruised, that have some kind of orthopedic problem, or even that you might think that have a concussion that they're kind of watching. You have to look for long-term chronic things. And many people that participate in sports are also prescribed medication to deal with underlying conditions that they might have in their life. And in Grant's case, Grant had been diagnosed with ADHD as well as narcolepsy. So he's kind of on both ends of the spectrum when you begin to think about the diagnosis he has. Attention deficit disorder that he's dealing with causes this kind of hyperactivity in the brain. But then on the other end, you also have narcolepsy, which is a condition where people will, and if you've never seen it, it's kind of an amazing thing. I've had my actual children accuse me of having narcolepsy because as I've gotten older, I'll just spontaneously fall asleep, but that's not the case. Now, narcolepsy affects people that are young as well, and they'll just suddenly their brain has been going at such a pace that they'll just drift off. They're asleep. The next thing you know, you're looking over there, and they might have been sitting at a desk, and they just fall asleep there. I've seen people that have narcolepsy that have gone to sleep while standing. It's that kind of condition, and your brain just like shuts down. And so sleep takes over. So he's dealing with this. So he's been diagnosed. He's had both of these diagnoses on board now for some time, probably. He's in a high pressure situation where he's wrestling at the University of the Cumberlands. And the University of Cumberlands, from an academic standpoint, is nothing to sniff at. It's a very rigorous environment. And so he has to stay on top of his game, taking care, because they are student athletes, not just athletes. They are student athletes. So he's having to contend with all of that. They put him on Adderall, and Adderall is a stimulant, all right? And it seems counterintuitive, but the way Adderall works, and they've used it for years and years, and it has been controversial over the years. With ADHD, the Adderall acts as a balance in the brain and keeps you focused. Here's the problem. Adderall can be lethal, absolutely lethal, if you're absent one particular ingredient. And it is something that is so basic. It is something that we take for granted day in and day out. It's something that many of us don't take enough of it in. But when you're an athlete, you need it. That's water. And in Grant's case, he didn't have any. Dave, I've got a son, as you well know, that's in the middle of a college career right now. He's doing quite well. I cannot imagine, I cannot even begin to plumb the depths of sorrow that would be on the receiving end of a phone call when you find out that this child that you have raised, that has been your everything to a great degree in life since the moment they were born, or maybe since the moment you knew that they were on the way, and suddenly they are gone.
It breaks my heart to just think of what this entire family has gone through. Grant Brace, at 20 years old, in great health. You mentioned narcolepsy and ADHD, something he had been dealing with for a number of years and had been treated with Adderall. And I didn't know that ADHD, or that Adderall rather, was used to treat both of these, narcolepsy and ADHD. As an athlete, I expect the coaches and the trainers know every athlete on their team, what they're like medically. I mean, are they taking medication? Is this an athlete that has diabetes, for example? They would have to know these things. They're in charge of our children, of our young people, while they're working them out. This is on the first day of practice. Now, remember, Grant Brace, as a wrestler, has already gone through his freshman year. He's now a sophomore. And this is the first day of wrestling practice. And as they went through practice, all of the wrestlers had a bottle of water. They were told when they got to the field, throw your water bottle over here, get running. That was the first thing. First day of practice, okay? Yeah, you got a bottle of water. Don't touch it. You've got a player on your team. You've got a wrestler who takes a medication for diagnosed medical issues. And one of the main things he has to have with this medication is water. And you're telling him he can't have it. You're telling somebody they can't have something they have to have, Joe. If you found out somebody did this to your son, I ask you, would you not want somebody to do something?
Yeah, because they make such a big deal. You've seen these things on social media where these kids come out and they have the signing day. And the coaches from your high school are there. Of course, the recruiter from the university is there, and they have various hats that they put on, and they make a big deal out of this. And the thing that always gets me is that they always use the term, people throw around the term family a lot, right? Oh, we're all one big family. No, you're not. That's something that's used to sell things. All right. You have a family, and ain't nobody going to take care of you like mom and daddy do. And if you're a mom and dad, you're trusting these individuals with your child. And granted, I still view an 18-year-old as a child, particularly if they're going off to college. They're not going off into the military and having to make their own way or whatever it is. They're not going out and putting on a hard hat and doing work like this. They're actually going to be in a university setting. It's a change in academia from what they're used to in high school. The rigor that they're going to find at the college is going to be different. The rigor out on the sports field is going to be different. There's going to be a higher expectation, and they can hold things over your head. They can say, well, look, if you don't want to lose your scholarship, or you don't want to lose whatever benefit that you have at the university. Now, this is an NAIA school. This is not like a big-time university. So they have limited resources in order to kind of offer up to the students. They're not going to have kids necessarily that are on full rides, when you think about some huge SEC school or Big Ten school or something like that. But still, they're student athletes. And so you're trusting your kids with these people to take care of them. And one of the things that you have to do constantly is monitor their status, particularly when they're involved in this rigorous physical training. It's my understanding that Grant according to the coaching staff, was, at least what they were saying, was not performing up to what they think that he should have been performing up to, the desired level. And he was actually he was being engaged in, correct me if I'm wrong about this, Dave, but in punishment practice, right?
Yeah, what happens on wrestling and in football, a lot of times, there will be punishment practice for those who underperform during practice or at a match or what have you. In this particular case, Joe, this is the first practice, okay? How underperforming can somebody be to have to endure a punishment practice? In the case of Grant Brace, they had gone through this first practice. The coaches told them to throw their water bottles off to the side. And after the practice was concluded, all of the drills have been run, all the workouts have been done. Now they come to the hill. This is a hill that I can't remember I think it was like a 45-degree angle. I could be really wrong on that.
Yeah, I know that it was 200 feet in length and probably roughly about a 40% incline, I think.
And there you go. That was what they called punishment hill, punishment practice. And so at the end of practice, if they were underperforming, they would get ridden really hard. If they were having a bad day, bad week, whatever it was, this was at the end of practice. Okay, so you've already gone through everything else. You've already done all the drills. You've done all the workouts, and you're pretty exhausted right about now. But now comes Punishment Hill. And at the end of Punishment Hill, that's where your gym is. That's where you go to take your clothes off and, get showered and all that. And yet you don't get to do that. You have to go up and down. Now, Grant Brace, I want to point something out, Joseph. You pointed out the NAIA school versus the NCAA. And it's not so much a different division. It's just a division for colleges that are a little smaller. You're not competing against Alabama and Auburn. You're competing against like-sized schools. And yet the NAIA bans things just like the NCAA does. And by the way, when they do regular drug testing at this school, if somebody is taking Adderall and is not prescribed to them, that would cause them to fail a drug test.
Yeah, it would. And because it is in fact, as we previously mentioned, a stimulant. And from their perspective, a stimulant is going to give somebody a decided advantage. But with Adderall, if you're taking it on board, and I know in Grant's case, it was allowed, but they, being the coaching staff, the training staff, had been made aware that, okay, this is what you have to do if you have somebody on Adderall. You have to keep them hydrated. If you don't, it can wind up in a terminal event, and guess what happens? He's being denied water. It's absolutely horrific when you think about it. And listen, when I say trainer or a person that's on the training staff, we're not talking about in high school, some small high school where you've got a kid that's really good in science and maybe he's not on the football team or the wrestling team. And they say, hey, we think you'd make a good trainer. We're going to come out here and teach you how to tape people up. We're going to teach you how to hydrate people with Gatorade or whatever it is that you're pumping in them. When they hand down judgments of like $14 million, that means that your staff has to have the ability from a training standpoint to recognize when people are starting to demonstrate things that present symptom standpoint like dehydration. You're looking for things like disorientation. You're looking for things just like dry mouth or where they can't catch their breath. You'll have people that will seize. You'll have individuals that will hallucinate. And of course, at the end, you have people that will go into full-blown cardiac arrest.
In the case of Grant, I want to point this out in a very heavy-handed manner because it deserves it, because I'm hoping that when you hear this, you will pass this along to every coach to every parent of an athlete In this particular case of Grant Brace, not only were the coaches aware, they had to file an exemption with the NAIA in order for Grant Brace to even be on the team. This was not just a matter of, oh, coach, he's aware. Here's a little signature from mom and dad saying it's okay. No. The doctors have to sign off. The coach, everybody is aware. And the NAIA is aware that he's taking this medication to treat narcolepsy and ADHD. And by the way, they are all informed that one of the things this student athlete has to have more than anybody else, he has to be hydrated. Whatever rules you have for hydration, water at practice, do not apply to this student athlete. He has to have it. While they were running Punishment Hill, he got so sick of the whole thing, he stopped. And he said, fine, I'm done. He went through an entire freshman year with this. He gets out there for the first practice, and he's not just getting it from the coaches. He's getting it from his own teammates. They're all riding him, okay, like he's a bicycle. They're riding him hard to the point where he can't take it anymore. But he's also an athlete. He's proud. He's a winner. He turns around and he comes back to practice knowing that they're going to heap even more on him. And Grant Brace pushed himself even harder to tackle that hill. And you know what? For the first several times, that kid made it. That 20-year-old young man made it up Punishment Hill several times. But then he started showing signs. What would I show if I am in the first stages running into a problem with hydration? More than just I'm thirsty. Now I'm past that. I've gone through my second wind, which a lot of people know about. I'm past that. I need something to drink, and I'm willing to eat grass to get it. What am I going through physically? What do I look like? What do I sound like?
Yeah, it is palpable and I mean that from the sense of the people that are witnessing it, and particularly those individuals. That's why I'm so shocked by this, particularly those individuals that should know better, because you'll see individuals that will, just from the dehydration. Now there's two separate things at work here, and we have to draw the line. Not only do we have this drug, Adderall, that creates problems, but then you have this idea of hyperthermia, and you have the idea of dehydration, because you've got all three of these in the mix now. And some of these things kind of cross communicate when you begin to think about it. Some of the presentations with dehydration, some of the things that you're going to be looking for is that you'll have excessive sweating. Like you'll see somebody that'll be like profusely sweating, right? Okay. And they're probably not necessarily screaming at the top of their lungs to hydrate at that point in time, particularly an athlete. They're trying to push through. Here's the problem. When they stop sweating and nothing is given to them, that's a problem. All right. When they don't have the ability to, they'll have kind of a flushed red appearance to them. Many times you'll have vomiting and diarrhea. Again, just like you'll have sometimes with Adderall, your nervous system will begin to react as well. You'll have nervousness. You can have hallucinations. You can have individuals that will literally be talking out of their head. You'll also have people that will be reactionary, like don't get between them and a drink of water, for instance, okay? Because they are thirsting to death, literally. They'll do anything they can do. And that actually happened in Grant's presentation. He was trying to get to water. He's pushing people aside, trying to get there, and he can't. And water is not being provided to him at all. And he's screaming, I'm thirsty, please help me. It's even at one moment in time that he goes over and tries to go into a cooler where there is ice and to bury his face in it, to cover his body in it, because he can feel, because it starts internally. You sense it externally, the heat, that maybe you're in the blazing sun or whatever the case might be, but you'll get this presentation. It'll kind of rise up from within you inside. Your brain is telling the rest of your body, we need to hydrate, and it's just not coming. And they're looking for any way to quench this unquenchable thirst at this point in time. Tremendous headaches as well that you'll see these people have. And a lot of this goes to this idea of not being able to hydrate, in the sense that the brain is screaming as well. The brain is a huge percentage of the brain is actually water. I don't know if a lot of people know that, but the makeup of the brain is that a good proportion of the brain is heavily dependent upon H2O. And of course, in Grant's case, it wasn't there. Dave, I'm going to throw a term out to you might not have heard before. My guess is that our listeners that are involved in medicine will have, but there's a term that's used as it applies to the skin, and it's called turgor, Turgor. I hear it pronounced turgor. Some people say turgor, but turgor. And it has to do with the rigidity of the skin. And as the skin begins to lose the cells, let's just say, as opposed to actually you think the skin, but the skin is made up of cells, right? And so as those cells become depleted of hydration, when, let's say, the skin is pressed are squeezed, the skin will no longer react normally. It won't bounce back, okay? And a lot of that has to do with dehydration. And one of the tough things when you're in the morgue and you're you have a case where you think that what you're dealing with might be dehydration. One of the things there's two things that you look for, big things. First off, you're going to look for the skin turgor, and it's not just the skin either. Where else it exists? It actually exists on the surface of the organs as well. So you can see, like when you go to examine a liver at autopsy or at the kidneys, for instance, kidneys are really impacted drastically by dehydration. The surface of the lungs, did you know that concurrently they respond negatively in a physical presentation to an absence of hydration as well? So they have an expected level of turgor with them as well. So when you depress those organs, because that's one of the things you do at gross examination at autopsy, when you remove the organs, you actually look at the organ, you touch it, you palpate it, you see how it looks, how it feels, that sort of thing. And you can actually sense that when you're touching these organs, it won't respond back the same way. The other thing that you look for, and this is something that people can kind of file away for future reference, is the color of urine. When you begin to see urine that is no longer kind of the yellowish clear color and it begins to get progressively darker till it turns brown, you're in a real danger zone there. And one of the reasons that's happening, remember what I said about the kidneys just a second ago. The kidneys act as a filter, and they're beginning to not be able to process these toxins that are in our system that normally they can kind of aid in filtering these things out, and it's presenting in the urine because there's an absence of water. There's a real imbalance there. So the urine itself will turn like really dark brown. And of course, we draw urine at autopsy and send it in and do drug panels and all those sorts of things. And you can appreciate it there as well. You can also appreciate it in the fluids of the eyes, which is the vitreous fluid that we draw out of the eyes at autopsy. So there's any number of ways, and it's more of what we refer to as a diagnosis of exclusion. You can have things that are like really, really over the top. Like you've got some really nasty disease that somebody is suffering from, whether it's a heart disease or a cancer or something like that. And you say, aha, this is what brought about their death, or trauma. If you're thinking about gunshot wound or anything like that, aha, that's what. But dehydration is one of those things that you have to be really fine tuned from a diagnostic standpoint. And so that's why what happened to Grant during those fatal moments there, when he's begging for water, he's asking for water, and no one is accommodating him on any level. They're not treating him. That's one of the reasons that circumstantial evidence and the eyewitness statements, because his teammates witnessed this happen as well.
I wanted to go back to that, Joe. Grant Brace. He is at the end of practice. By the way, this part of punishment practice, the coaches claimed that one of the players, because they have to do fundraising. You mentioned earlier the difference between an NCAA big school versus an NAIA school. Well, at the NAIA level, in some cases, they have to raise their own money for uniforms and such. And that was something that they had done in the offseason. And at this first practice, apparently one of the players did not meet his quota for what he was supposed to raise. And so that was their reason that day for Punishment Hill. Granted, they all had varying degrees of success on Punishment Hill. But think about this. You're at the end of practice. It's your first practice. It's August. It's the heat of the day. And Grant Brace has run up the hill 7 times successfully. Now, what would Grant Brace look like, based on all of the medical stuff that we know, as he has completed it 7 times and he's begging for water and the coaches turn on him and say, go clean out your locker. You're done. That's what Grant Brace was faced with when his body was crying out for water. You want water? Go clear out your locker. I want you to know that, because would he at that level, Joe, you mentioned how the brain is made up of water. And now a lot of things make sense to me about people who are dehydrated and are going through different parts of this, that they start speaking crazy. I didn't realize the brain was so much water. So now you're dehydrating on every level. A coach tells you you're done. Go clear out your locker. and yet you force yourself to get out there and keep trying. What is going to happen to you in front of everybody? We've got other players throwing up. I've thrown up at practice before. I mean, it's not an uncommon thing to happen. But what's the difference between somebody overworking in the heat versus somebody who's really suffering and headed down a path to death?
Well, and not just that. And one of the things you're going to look at, obviously, are also going to be the eyes as well. Sometimes the pupils will actually blow out, big dark circles, that sort of thing. It almost looks like shock.
During workout? You mean you would see that like at practice?
Yeah, well, when they're phasing into this status of dehydration. And so it's a neurological response. And here's another key thing, because you mentioned how bought in he is in being the people pleaser and that he wants to succeed. They're already talking about washing you out, right? Can you imagine you're going through all of this physical trauma and your brain is beginning to shut down already, and now you got this individual that's telling you that they're going to train wreck you now. Go clean out your locker. And all of us that have been in athletics know what that means. When they say clean out your locker, that means you're done, dude. And so you have that stimulus coming in as well. And so anything that's going on with him physically is going to be even more damaging at that point in time, virtue of this kind of stimulus that's coming in. Even if he can, and here's the problem, you don't know what he could perceive at a higher level at that point in time. Would that heap on more anxiety on top of everything he's dealing with? Because, anxiety is one of the things that an individual that's going through the status of dehydration and hyperthermia, they deal with anxiety as well, because this builds up in them. And I think one of the issues, Dave, with me that is really horrible about this is that I'm not trying to be dramatic here, but people need to understand dehydration is actually a punishment that has been used for prisoners of war. Okay. It's denial of like a basic necessity. Okay. And there are some people that deny themselves certain things in life because they see it. Some people on a spiritual journey, they're trying to purify themselves and all those sorts of things. Generally, it involves food, not water. But that's one of the things. And it gave me pause because, and I know you're going to know this name when I mention it, Dave. Do you remember Savannah Hardin? 9 years old in Atala, Alabama. That was back in 2012. Remember, she was being punished because she snuck some candy or something, and she was
ate a piece of chocolate on the school bus.
Yeah, on the school bus. And she was made to march around or walk around the yard carrying firewood around. And this is a 9-year-old girl. And this is not too dissimilar from what Grant experienced. And so you're actually weaponizing a condition like dehydration, and then you combine what Grant was already going through relative to ADHD, narcolepsy, and having Adderall on board, where it's one of these things that has to be so fine-tuned, you have to pay attention to it. And I cannot imagine that, look, the NAIA has a rule in place specifically dealing with student athletes that are on Adderall. So you know what that tells me, Dave? That tells me that this is not the first time that someone has had Adderall in their system, and that I haven't heard about any of those people passing away. So that means that there were things in place, there were mechanisms in place to treat this. They had an awareness of it, and I think that goes to a great degree of the liability here.
There's other things that happened at the end of practice. They had a little meeting, okay, after they've gone Punishment Hill, after they've done the whole practice and Punishment Hill, and Grant was told to go clean out his locker, but he came back and forced him. He did complete practice. He finished that practice. That's the heart of a champion that could do that. This guy, he would not give up, Joe. And so at the end of practice, before they let the team go in there to the weight room to go ahead and start cooling down, they were having a quick little team meeting. And at that point, other wrestler said that Grant couldn't stand up, and he told them, I can't stand up. I can't see. He was holding onto a branch of a tree, and witnesses said that his pupils were twitching. His eyes were twitching. He said, guys, I need water. I need water. When they finally did get back to the wrestling room, he laid down. You mentioned him, sticking his face in the ice. He couldn't even get it all together to help himself at that point. I need water. He just kept saying that. But you know what else happened, Joe? Inside the training room, one of the teammates attempted to wrap ice in a towel and place it on Grant to help him cool down. and a coach stopped him, said, "Get away from him." Grant then begins to speak gibberish inside the room, and he charged a teammate. He physically charged at another teammate and then ran out of the gym begging for water. Can you explain what's going on with that? How does that happen?
Yeah, I mean, he's totally disoriented at this point in time. The one thing that he knows, and it's at a base level within him, is that he needs to hydrate. He needs to get, and I saw a video, Dave, and and again, it made me reflect to my own children. There's CCTV video of him outside, banging on doors, pulling on doors, trying to get back in, trying to find water, just so that he can quench that thirst that seems absolutely unquenchable. His tank was absolutely empty at that point in time. And it's not too long thereafter, it turned into a fatal event.
The University of Cumberland's in Kentucky agreed to a $14.1 million settlement with the family of Grant Brace. They filed a civil lawsuit. No criminal charges were ever filed in this case. The lawsuit that was filed a year after Brace's death alleged that the university, the athletic director, and coaches were negligent and failed to provide him with medical aid that could have prevented his death. They also alleged two coaches created an atmosphere of fear of intimidation in the wrestling program through manipulation and abuse. Those two coaches were no longer employed by the school by the time this civil suit was settled. But again, the family was given $14.1 million, and there were no criminal charges filed.
I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.